really looking forward to this discussion because we are going to bring up a panel. Yes, indeed. We're going to move over to the sofas, and as they come to the stage, I'm just going to say who on earth they are. So I'm delighted to be joined. I think our panel is ready. I just want to check the queue that our panelists are indeed ready to go. They are strolling from the backstage. They're very laid back, has to be said. Perhaps we'd encourage our panelists to come to the stage if they would. Our panel ready? Are they coming through? Excellent, very good. Well, as you come up, ladies, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me just explain who's going to be joining me on the soft furnishing area, as I call it. So we are joined by Narmada Guruswamy, who is Director of Forensic Data and Analysis. Welcome, welcome, ladies. Come on up if you would, as quickly as you can. We need to move on with the program, if you would. Thank you very much. And Roni Savage, who is a chartered engineer, chartered geologist, CEO of GeoMass Associates. Natalia, Isajenko, who is the Vice President, Global Head of Professional Services Solutions and S&P Global. And last but not least, Barbara Hamilton-Bruce, Head of Client and Business Operations for Simmons & Simmons Solutions Limited. Please join me in welcoming ladies to the stage of the panel. Very good, thank you very much. So actually, can I probably sit over there? Would that be all right? Thank you very much. Sorry, Barbara. Thank you. Wonderful. Listen, I'm really looking forward to this discussion because we've been talking about the importance of mentorship and mentoring. And the first thing I'm going to do, actually, is go to the audience, if you would permit me. Again, we have a question on Slido for you. The question is, how many of you, very curious on numbers, how many of you believe that having access to a mentor has helped your career prospects? And then we're going to come on to a question about mentoring programs and how successful they are. But let's start with that question. How many of you believe having access has helped your career prospects? Now, listen, what I'm really loving about the mix of this panel is you have such different experiences. So I'm very curious to hear your points of view about who do you go to for what type of different career support in your career journeys? And I'd like to start, if we would, I'm very keen to build on remarks that have gone before rather than repeat, because we want to have a really rich conversation. I'd love to hear a bit about your own experiences, if you would. And I'm going to invite you to kind of come at it from a slightly different angle each, if you would. So I'm curious to know, what's your experience been? And also, what impacts did it have? And Roni, I'm going to start with you, Wood, actually, as a mentor. Tell us about an experience.
Right, how far back do I go? I'm an engineer working in construction in an industry where only 16% of the workforce is female and a very tiny percentage are women who run their own businesses. And having a woman of colour who runs her own business in the way that I do, there's nobody else. So it's absolutely important that you have somebody there who you can look up to, somebody to support you. And when I was sort of progressing in my career, there wasn't that person. So I know more than anyone the importance of having a mentor there, and I'm determined to be that person for those who come after me. And I think that what I've been able to offer is the light at the end of the tunnel to those mentees of mine, is the light at the end of the tunnel, to demonstrate to them what is possible, to offer them guidance and support, but also to share my experiences and the skills that I have to be able to pursue and progress and be successful in my career. Because what I find in the absence of that, I mean, they say that you can't be what you can't see. I mean, even though I've managed to be successful in my career, the fact that there is nobody else who looks like me doing what I do demonstrates that you need to have people there who are visible. And that's the role that a mentor can deliver on, is provide, again, I say that again, that light at the end of the tunnel that shows that you can be successful irrespective of what you look like.
And the light at the end of the tunnel is really thought-provoking, because it's so often, and we heard from the previous speaker about coming from different backgrounds and different, particularly sort of in the world of cybersecurity, having come from an engineering sort of background, and to be able to see that kind of pathway ahead. And later on, we're going to have a session about squiggly pathways, or whether it's a perfect journey. But knowing that light at the end of the tunnel, really, really important. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Natalia, I'd love to bring you in here, actually. Now, let's flip it around. From a mentee's point of view, let's hear about the experience and what impact did that have?
Yeah. So I have a very real-life anecdote that has happened to me about 10 years ago, where I had a mentor who was a CTO of the company that I used to work for at the time, and that was a female mentor, which is still rather unusual in the technology roles. And I think as we were working through that mentorship relationship, what she has helped me to develop is the skill set of engaging with more senior stakeholders in the company. And I think it is an example of a very successful mentee relationship that I have had experience of, because I still use that skill set. It's been 10 years or so. And recently I've met the same individual who now is the CTO of a different company in a more of a peer-to-peer situation. And that's just an example of how successful those mentorship relationships can be. And I think as a mentee, what was important for me and what I think has helped me to action some of the conversations was really to have a plan and understanding of what was it that I needed to achieve at that point in time in my career. And I think those of you who are mentees today and those of you who are considering maybe taking on a mentee, my advice would be just give it a chance and really work with your mentors and try developing the skill set. And for mentors, I would say that don't try solving the problems of your mentees and rather let them develop and let them find their own interpretation of some of the points that you might be addressing with them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting balance, isn't it, between somebody coming to you and going, actually, I want to develop in a particular area, a particular skill sets, and I want to figure out the answers. But what you're saying is, I'm not asking you to tell me what the answers are. I want you to work with me in frameworks that can help me solve those challenges. Really, really, really interesting thoughts there. I wonder if we could turn the conversation onto sponsorship, if you would. So, Narmada, let me come to you first of all. Again, I'd love you to talk about, from having been a sponsor, an experience and what impact that had.
Being a sponsor essentially means that you are shining a light on someone. So we are in the middle of the World Cup, so perhaps a football analogy would be apt. If a mentor is like a coach, a sponsor is like your PR agent. They are the ones who go around telling people about what you can do. My experience sponsoring one of my colleagues was very, very interesting in that this person was in a team where they weren't connecting very well with the rest of the team. Their particular talents weren't being picked up and highlighted, and rather they were being asked to do something else. So it's like a fish being asked to climb a tree is not going to do very well. I just connected with that person, and when I asked that person to participate in some of the programs that I was running, they just ran with it. They had superb organizational capabilities, and it just shone in the kinds of projects that we were doing together. I think it delivered on 3 fronts. It gave that person higher visibility. Other people in the business were able to see that person and appreciate their talents. It opened up the horizons for that person. They could see what else they could do and which other parts of the business they could connect with. And I think it also delivered a boost of confidence because they were playing on their turf. They were doing something that they were comfortable with.
Wonderful. Great. So visibility, horizon opening, and confidence, really, really important. Can I flip that round, actually? Barbara, I'd love to get your thoughts from having been sponsored. What impact has that had on your career?
Well, I think it's fairly fair to say that if I hadn't have been sponsored, I wouldn't be sat here today. I was very lucky in as much as I fell out of school, falling into the category of the missing middle, neither too good or too bad to get noticed. And fell into a job in a law firm and was spotted by somebody who saw my ambition. I didn't know I had ambition. I just liked to get the job done. And that individual arranged for me to be sponsored in an organization that had never done anything like that before. It had the very traditional pathway to becoming a lawyer. They created the funding, they organized the training, they organized day release. And 32 years on, he is still the single biggest influence in my career. We're still in contact. He still tells me how wonderful he thinks I am, which we all
need to hear it every day.
We all need to benefit from it. But I think that sort of opportunity, hearing you say, shining a light, creating the space, giving space for people to rise up, is really my experience of sponsorship done really, really well. And sometimes not intentionally, simply taking an opportunity and seizing it.
And that sort of career journey, lifelong sponsorship is really interesting. So thinking about, because what you were saying is it's a moment in time, and your points of view, thinking about the length of the career relationship, if you like. Really interesting. Thank you for all your thoughts on that. It's been really fascinating sort of picking them from different directions as well. But I mean, we've been very positive about what's worked well. What I'm now really curious to know is about what doesn't work so well, the pitfalls, the shortcomings. This room will no doubt leave here enthused and set up corporate sponsorship and mentorship schemes, because it's interesting going back to the audience actually, because you said that having a mentor helped accelerate your career, but only 59% of you have said that. 32% have said you've never had a mentor, and 9% of you say you don't know how to access mentors. So there's obviously some work to be done, but there's a risk we go off on the wrong direction. I wonder, Narmada, can I come to you first of all? And again, I'm going to ask each of you to approach it from a different point of view, if you like, just to enrich the conversation. From a corporate profile, formal corporate profile or program point of view, I'd love to get your thoughts on what works well, but particularly where are the shortcomings and the pitfalls?
Yeah, very happy to expand on that. I've been part of several programs at EY, and I've also been part of programs which involved other organizations, PAN organization. I think the structure that it gives you is really, really useful. So it's a little bit like going to a university where the content is curated, the course is all set up for you, so you kind of have that structure to work within. But it also makes it quite hard to get that personal connection, and the key to this relationship is that personal connection. So I think it's really important to have that structure, but to have that flexibility within it to make sure that if the relationship isn't working, you're able to leverage the rest of the people who are in the pool and find the ones who really meet your needs. The other key thing that I find is the mentee or the sponsoree being ready for it. They have to be in the right mental state. They have to be at the right state of maturity to understand what they are going for and what they need to focus on. This doesn't have to be something that they've got in the very first meeting, but when the mentor or sponsor coaches them through that journey, they have to be in a mental space where they're able to pick up the clues and run with it and get to a point where they can articulate to the other person what they're looking for so that the other person can help them with it. Without that preparation, without being in that mental space, it doesn't quite work.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting, your remarks there about maturity, and we were talking earlier with Vanessa about, one size doesn't fit all, but you need to develop this relationship where you're trying to figure out what matters together, and also admitting if it's the wrong relationship in a way, if I've understood that correctly, and calling that, and having a big enough pool. Really, really interesting. Roni, can I bring you in here? Because I know you, I don't want to preempt your answer, but I know you take quite a kind of set approach with each of your mentees as well. Talk to us about that, and also talk your thoughts about what doesn't work quite so well.
Right, so I think it's, I know we spoke about this before, it's really important that the mentee takes charge of that relationship, that the mentee understands what they want out of that relationship. I mean, I offer myself on a number of mentorship programs, and it's very difficult when you have a meeting with a mentee, especially the first meeting, and they have no idea why they've been matched to you. They have no idea anything about you or what they want to get out of the relationship. So that's the first thing, that's what I always focus on, is understanding what you want from this relationship, because it's really about the mentee, not about the mentor. And the danger there in terms of what doesn't work is that you have a mentor who goes into a relationship with their preconceived ideas of what they want to say to their mentee and what they want to get out of their mentee. It's not about the mentor. I mean, I learn a lot from mentoring relationships, but it is, I know firmly that it isn't about me. So I'd always encourage the mentee to know exactly what they want out of it, to set goals and objectives that they want out of that relationship, whether it's a 6-month or a 12-month relationship, to be sure and be firm about what they want to get out of it. So what you can then do as a mentor is that you can work with them on those goals and you can tick those boxes off and ensure that they're getting what they need out of that relationship. So that's, I offer a very structured mentoring relationship, which is based on goals and objectives, because otherwise it doesn't work. And what I also ensure is at the end of that relationship that we go back to the goals that we set and we ensure that we've met those goals, because otherwise it's been an unsuccessful relationship. So to get the most out of that mentoring relationship, I mean, some are informal, I know that, but I always try and draw my mentoring relationships and give it some formality so that I know that I've given something and the mentee also walks away from it knowing that they've gained something.
Yeah, so very clear goals and sense of direction, but also do your research before you begin.
Absolutely.
So know what your ask is and why that matters as well. Barbara, can I turn to you, if you would? Just thinking about, let's go a little bit more freeform. Let's go a little more ad hoc, because we're all busy people. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what works well, what doesn't work so well.
So I think I've had, over the sort of the time that I've been working in mentoring relationships, probably the freeform does work best. That has been my experience. Not to say that, you know, there isn't a right time and a right place for things, because what I've sort of found is that, and certainly my own experience is that there are different touch points and different needs that you have as your career is progressing over time. And allowing somebody to kind of flex in and flex out, make the requests, because as you mentioned, Roni, being able to sort of articulate what it is that you need out of that relationship. So in fact, some of the mentoring relationships that I think have been most impactful have been fairly short and sharp. They've been focused on a particular set of challenges, maybe a particular promotion or you know, a particular challenge in the workplace. And yeah, just making sure that the mentee is coming with a really clear view, and ideally not with the idea that they're going to get a job out of it, because that has been where totally failed. And there is nothing like the piece of silence when you say, what is it you hope to get out of it? And they say a job.
Right.
So yeah, for me, freeform has worked really well.
Yeah, and this is a really, really helpful discussion, because actually we're looking at it from different angles. Now, Natalia, you've been sitting here listening very sort of keenly, no doubt, and patiently. I'd love to hear about any other models you've observed that work well, or where do you see the pitfalls?
Yeah. I think when it comes to models that exist within organizations, one thing that I've observed, having been a mentor and a mentee and a protege and a sponsor over a number of years, is I think the importance of that feedback loop back to the program, I think is very, very important, because there were a few examples where relationships have not been successful for whatever reason. Now, the question is, what do you do then? And I think many people just struggle through and mechanically grow through the program, which I think is kind of a bit of a waste of time for both the mentee and a mentor. And I think allowing for that feedback, either back to the program coordinators or even directly to the mentor, can be quite powerful. And I certainly have had an example where I have been in a relationship, just didn't click. It just was not going anywhere, and I was dreading those sessions, and you kind of feel that you have to do it, but then you don't want to. And instead of kind of sticking with it, I've decided to have an open conversation with my mentor at the time, and he was relieved. Because for him, it was equally as difficult. And I think having that understanding that there are two people in that relationship is very important, and allowing, you know, for course correction within the program or within a direct relationship, I'd say would be a very important factor.
Yeah, and I kind of picked up on a bit of a riffle from the audience, though, the sort of whether people end up in forced relationships, that you just have to know when to call it, and there's nothing wrong with that, is really important. Thank you for your thoughts. I wonder if we could just kind of pivot the conversation, or kind of, I was sort of, let's move it on a notch, a cog shift, if you like, around the conversation about sponsorship. We've talked there about mentorship. Now, women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored. It's something I've heard a lot in my career. Natalia, can I stay with you? Because I would love to hear your advice about what advice would you give this audience about how best to develop sponsorship initiatives?
Yeah. I think, first of all, what tends to happen, and again, based on my observations, is that sponsorships quite often are limited to the top tiers in the organization. So the C-level tends to end up oversubscribed, and then the middle levels just don't have an opportunity to be sponsors. And then that, I think, will result in, you know, very few people knowing how to sponsor, and many people in the organization having no idea of what a good sponsorship looks like. So I think extending the sponsorships throughout the verticals of the organization is very important. I'd also suggest that when we talk about sponsorships, this is where a degree of consideration for matching, because sponsors are actively promoting people, you know, the protégés. And I think that's where, if in mentorship space, I believe one can look for transferable skill set, and mentorships can be quite a bit wider. When it comes to sponsorships, I'd say a slightly more precise matching would be beneficial for all involved. I think for sponsors, I think it's important that when you have decided that you're going to promote somebody or advise, you know, somebody in your organization taking on a different role or a bigger role, it's important to support them in a way that does not overshadow them. Because I think there is a tendency for sponsors to jump in and try to solve problems if something doesn't go right. I think it can be quite detrimental to the confidence of the individual in question and also to their image within the organization. And last, perhaps, point that I would suggest is that when we are dealing in a situation where the sponsor and the coverage of sponsors, I would really suggest trying to balance it. And it could be different aspects of balancing, whether it's agenda, geographical, role coverage, corporate titles. I don't think that it would be beneficial to focus just on saying sponsors are senior, members of the staff, protégés are always junior. I think it actually can be quite varied, and it can lead to quite good results, allowing people to shine.
Yeah. And one of the things that really sort of shines through from your remarks there is about the whole thing about, you know, be aware of what the detrimental impact could be. And Roni, you were saying about, you know, this is about confidence is one of the points. And Barbara, I wonder if I could ask you, what advice would you give this room for senior execs about how to sharpen their sponsorship skills? Because there's a risk there could be unintended consequences.
Yeah, and I think it's this, again, this point about being clear about what is the purpose that's sitting behind the sponsorship. And then making sure that you set yourself an agenda. So as sponsor, being quite clear not only what the person you're sponsoring is hoping to achieve out of the arrangement, but also what your role is to play. And in communicating your role, you make it quite clear all the things that you will do, but specifically all the things that you will not do. But also then within it, create the space for that feedback in terms of touching base with the person who's sponsoring. Do they feel overshadowed? Do they feel overcrowded? Do they need you to step back? Or do they need you to step forward? I think that just that transparency of communication and that freedom of communication makes sure that you're always listening and not assuming.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Narmada, I wonder if I could come back to you. I mean, we were talking earlier about your point about it's about building confidence of your sponsoree, if you like, sponsee. But I would wonder if, from the other point of view, whether or not they know how to signal to sponsors that they need them. And I'd love to get your thoughts about how do we best do that when we see a sponsor and go, look, I really would love them to be. What advice would you give the audience?
Yeah, I think I'd pick up where Barbara left off to say it shouldn't be signaling that you want a job. I think that isn't an approach that lands particularly well. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's useful to start from the point that senior people also need people coming up behind them. They can't grow an organization without having that flow upwards. So there is a need to be fulfilled, and understanding that and finding the person that you connect with in terms of that overlap between where you want to go and where the organization needs more talent. I think that is the first point in terms of identifying that overlap and who can help you to get there. The second point is answering the question, what's in it for them? Whether it's growing a different part of the business, whether it's opening up a sector, whether it's giving them some skills which they don't currently have. Understanding that and articulating it to them will give them purchase in the relationship. And my third point would be to get involved, to use that connection. And as several of our speakers have already said, this is a loop. It's not a one-way relationship. So it's to give back to the sponsor and to allow them to grow as well as the relationship develops. Yeah, and I love this whole thing about, really identify where the opportunities may be, think about, and also the loop of the relationship. But Roni, I mean, quite often I hear people confusing what's kind of sponsorship with
coaching. This does, the words quite often get into sort of connected, if you like, or interposed. Where do the lines between the two sit in your mind, and how do they differ or overlap?
Very blurry. So a sponsor is somebody who speaks about you when you're in the room, somebody who promotes you, and actually, sort of a step further from what you just said, it depends on what you want out of the sponsor. It may well be a job. And it's defining what it is that you want out of it. I have sponsored people, and I know many people around me who have, because as you grow and as you progress in your career, you build your connections and you build your confidence. And the people who are coming after you do not necessarily have that confidence or those connections. So as a sponsor, you have that opportunity to open the door for those who don't have the connections and who don't have the confidence that you do. So if sponsoring them into an opportunity is something that you're able to do, and that's something that they want, but you've got the match to be able to make that happen, then you can. But again, it depends on what that person is looking for. With regards to coaching, it's a very, I mean, I know it does get quite blurry in terms of, am I your mentor, am I your coach, am I your sponsor? And sometimes there is that overlap in delivering on all of those. But generally, a coach is somebody who is trained to provide guidance. You know, I've spoken to coaches, and they have a very different approach. You know, a mentor's sharing their skills, they're sharing their experiences with you, they're listening and they're signposting. A coach is actually listening to you and getting you to find solutions yourself. So they have an incredible way of questioning you to ensure that you're getting to where you need to get to, actually yourself, with your own thoughts, with your own sort of inquiring your mind to come to those solutions. So a coach is somebody who should be quite specialist in doing that. So I'd never, ever present myself as a coach. But a sponsor is somebody who, I think any of us, irrespective of where we are, and I just want to make that point, irrespective of where we are in our careers, any of us can be sponsors and mentors. Everybody, irrespective of where you are in your career, needs a sponsor and a mentor. So even at the very top of your career, whether it's reverse mentoring, whether it's somebody who is slightly above, actually whether it's somebody who's on par with you, but has different experiences, we all need sponsors and mentors at some point in our career. Coaching is very, very special.
Yeah. And it's important to kind of to understand that differential. Thank you very much for that. The eagle-eyed of you in the room will know that I had opened up, without necessarily telling you, that I'd opened up another Slido question. What's phenomenal is the number of remarks coming in here, because it's a free-form approach, which was what can companies do to ensure their mentoring programs are successful? We've got some phenomenal ideas in here. What I'd love to do as we go into really the last matter of minutes, it's amazing how time flies, is I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to give you about 30 to 40 seconds. How has being a mentor or a sponsor changed you? Barbara, coming to you first.
I think being a mentor has given me the space to also develop myself as well as working with individuals, because it requires something more of you, a different set of skills, a different potentially perspective on the experiences that somebody is coming to you with. So I think, you know, I would say mentoring gives a huge lot back if you are willing to take it and if you are willing to be explored and actually be a bit vulnerable in the process.
Yeah, wonderful. Natalia, would you agree with that? And anything you'd add?
Yeah, absolutely. I would also suggest that being a sponsor and a mentor has made me a better leader. And I'm referring perhaps to that reverse mentorship aspect of it, because having been in a number of those kind of relationships allowed me to better understand different parts of my organization and grow my own leadership skills as the result of those relationships.
So Roni and Narmada, I want to ask you a slightly different question, which is, how do you actively encourage others to step up? Roni, can I come to you first?
By doing what we're doing now, doing a lot of speaking and networking and speaking to people, and just, I encourage through visibility. And I think that works in both ways. It encourages others to also think, I need to give back. I need to pass on the baton. I think I would ask everyone in this room, and I'd encourage everyone in this room to offer themselves as a mentor, a sponsor to somebody else. So I do that through just being visible. it's absolutely important. We talk about our industry, well, tech having only 16% of females in tech, but the only way that we can change that is by having the women who have excelled in the industry, but who are stepping up and showing that they have excelled, and they're able to demonstrate that to girls who come after us. So that's how I encourage, is by just being visible.
Visibility really, really matters. And Narmada, see us out with your final thoughts about how you encourage people to step forward.
I would say start by realizing that your story is unique and it can help someone. Don't underestimate what effect it can have on someone. And I would also say that there are two ways to shine. One is by being the candle, and the other is by being the mirror that reflects it. And as a mentor or a sponsor, you're being that mirror.
Yes. Wonderful. I'd say it's been a phenomenal conversation, because I have experienced that sometimes when we talk about sponsorship or mentorship, it can be a little bit kind of one-dimensional. And what we haven't done today is take a one-dimensional approach to the discussion. So thank you for all your thoughts. We've tackled it from the perspective of being a sponsor or a sponsee, a mentor, a mentee, the difference in coaching, also what we get back from it, which is really important, and how to sharpen some of those skills, which we're going to take in to the table sessions that are going to happen right now. But before we do that, please join me in thanking the panel. Ladies, thank you so much indeed. Thank you. If I can encourage you to take your seat. Thank you very much. Thank you.